too. And I'm not a big fan of sweating at all.
Excuse me, I'm gonna put this on the table.
I'm just trying not to sweat.
I know.
That's good.
So I downloaded.
I've been done before. I said it right out.
So
Still covered wet.
accidentally texted me.
Orange button.
I think it was
Open that.
Oh, we sent it. Oh, you got it in your email.
Yeah, I'll do it.
58?
I'm trying to figure out how to make this easier again. I haven't figured out. I haven't played around with it. You can open
I
it
was
with
at the
that.
past week in
You
Western
just tap it.
Colorado. I downloaded it.
You did, yeah. You got it up there.
12,065 degrees. So,
See
see what all that
It's like my
stuff
shoulder
was.
devil.
And now I'm gonna use that.
I went last weekend to
For the
a
shoulder.
Or he's your angel, I don't know. Who's on the other side? Oh,
Who's on first?
Yes,
We're about to hit our.
that's right. We'll be at ours pretty soon.
Yeah.
How you guys doing? Good, how are
He
you?
looks like the
You
angel.
try coming down there, or guys are coming up, what you say?
I think it's down.
Elevation.
Are we still talking north, south, or elevation?
Elevation's
I'm
up.
an artillery guy, you'll up and down, left and right.
Found the exact spot.
All I know is every time I look at the weather, you're always about 10
We're always
degrees
better
cooler
than
than
the
that.
That's right.
People don't realize that,
Tell your friends.
and in the winter, because of the change of the change of the weather patterns, we're actually 10 degrees warmer even though we're at altitude.
Really?
Is that right? I didn't know that.
So this is
You know what we need to
Look
do?
at this.
we don't quite have a Mediterranean climate
One of
because
those
this
little
is
jet
too
stands.
far
You can just
apart.
unplug
And
the
we don't have the
power.
moisture obviously the Mediterranean
Yeah.
does.
My son has one.
Did you give it a snow dusting?
This is a hidden, into one of the snow cones that sits up
Oh,
on the
yeah, the hand that plugs into your
mountain.
phone.
Stand out here and
Yeah, I got it right here.
Like you enjoy it by looking at it.
Let me find it.
That's a good way to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really useful.
It was free, by the way.
It was free. I'm just gonna let you use it for the meeting. U of A. I didn't either, but U of A, I don't have it in here, Carolyn. It's in my car apparently. Yeah, they're really cool.
How can I set this to stay on longer?
You plug it into the jack on your phone.
Oh, you have to go into settings and change the, what's it called? I did
I've
that
even used
too.
it at home a little bit.
Yeah, it's way too short.
I'll bring it Thursday so you can
Try
try
those dots.
Okay, you're welcome. I must have, when I was digging for stuff, I probably
Put it out.
So it's probably in my car.
And then,
Screen timeout.
there you go. Yeah.
Oh, Mayor.
Lock, no. What's it under? Let me.
They've been in Boston on the Accident Foundation, and they do 20 miles over 3 days, 20 miles a day, 3 days. And they flew down to the line, so they're all, their feet hurt and their bodies hurt. Yeah, it's her and a bunch of other girls in the community.
This is really, I like all their pictures.
Yeah, and they raised 20,000.
If it was really intuitive.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's incredible.
I don't get it. Eventually they'll. And then they'll really stop doing it.
Okay, so, I don't know if you mentioned it, so I'm sharing it with you because you might have noticed. What are you asking for?
Do you have your fan? I think I must be in mine, must be in my car.
No, I don't,
Okay,
but
I told her I'd bring it Thursday.
I will express order one. I said that's one, the big, you know, the nice
Oh, yeah. I actually got one.
charge at UPC.
Those little battery operated ones?
Yeah, Lena has one for her class, it's so annoying. It goes on UPC and you can.
What are you telling me?
Oh, so I had noticed this person living in the city And there's some other numbers, but this one, like I was like, that'd be cool to know. But then everyone said like 47 people. I guess with the model they were using, they weren't able to get because it was a very basic model. And he said that the woman, I can't remember, made some assumptions, also plugged in some numbers, but they're not accurate. And there's some of that sprinkled throughout the song. And you might have noticed that because you'll see there's like repeats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comb through it because I assumed they would just.
Well, yeah, no, I was curious because,
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why they don't look at it.
very recent. Huh? Basically helping them
Oh.
they can look good.
What did you do to help with?
I had some notes written down.
Call over the work session for the City of Sierra Vista for September 10, 2019. We have one member who, one council member who's not going to be present today. So we'll start with presentation and discussion item 8, and it's the September 12 council meeting. So we obviously will call the meeting to order, roll call, invocation, pledge, awards and presentations. We have a proclamation for the Fred G. Acosta Job Center. We'll have the city manager's report. Anything specific on the city manager's report, since I guess you won't be getting, Chuck will be back tomorrow.
Chuck is back from vacation tomorrow,
Yeah.
so I don't have anything.
You don't have it. Okay, the item 2 is the consent agenda. We have approval of the regular minutes for August 8th. Any additions, completions, corrections on the minutes for August 8th? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and we have the appointment of Laura Shannon for the Commission on Disabilities Issues as item 2.2. Any comments on that? Okay, then we move to item 3, which is a public hearing item. It's a resolution to opening public hearing for the submission of the U.S. Housing and Urban Development 2018 CAPER. And Blake, you gonna do this one?
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on there, bud.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and any members of the public here. Matt couldn't be here today. He's over at the Western Planning Conference over in New Mexico, but he'll be here for the meeting on Thursday. All right. So for project year 2018, the city received $260,652 to help with community development projects in low and moderate income areas. And this includes housing rehab, public infrastructure, and public services. The HUD requires recipients of CDBG funds to prepare an annual evaluation of the progress and implementation of programs and activities under their CDBG program. CAPER also describes the city's progress in meeting its overall 5-year goals and priorities set in the city's consolidated plan. This CAPER was, per CDBG regulations, released to the public and advertised in the Herald on August 27th. The public comment period ends September 12th, and public comments will be submitted to HUD with the report once approved. For brief summary, 8 projects and services were supported by the project year's 2018 CDBG funding. This includes the Emergency Home Repair Program, the demolition of the 523 East Leonardo da Vinci Drive single-family home, the demolition of the former Publix Workyard, which Matt wanted me to let you guys know that the bids have come in for the project, and $82,000 was the lowest bid. And demolition is expected to start for that within the next 60 days. And we also have the Boys and Girls Club scholarships, the Working Well project, which was extended into November, the Timothy Lane Park improvements, the Fry Townsite street improvements, and the Fry Townsite alleyway improvements. These projects all fall in line with our established target goals, which include public infrastructure improvements, provision of needed services, removal of slum and blight, and owner housing rehabilitation. Staff recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution to approve the program year 2018 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report.
Questions from Bud?
What was that recommendation again?
The recommendation is just what it says in the memo. Essentially, the staff recommends the City Council conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution to approve the program year 2018 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report.
Okay. Questions? Discussion?
I have a couple
Ms. Moore, go ahead.
So the hearing started August 27th, correct?
The period.
Or the period for hearing?
The public comment period.
Public comment period. So on the 12th, we would be opening the hearing?
Yeah,
Or
that's why
approving
the hearing is the public, since it's on our agenda as a public hearing item,
Okay.
that's when that will occur.
So we're allowing public
Okay.
comment
They
during
can, they can direct comment to us.
that time. Okay. So my only couple questions was that the Working Well project was through Wellness Corrections?
Wellness Connections.
And it's extended through November.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Essentially, I believe in, again, I wasn't the one who was primarily managing it. Matt started it out. But when it did start, it had a sort of a delayed start. And so they couldn't meet all their project goals under the amount of time that they were initially given. So we offered them an extension. And so essentially they're working through that extension to November.
Okay. And then, in one point, it says that we're looking for a possible nonprofit partner because to address affordable housing, to meet that requirement. But then, in the end of page 11, it says the city is referring to Habitat for Humanity for immediate housing needs, which isn't true.
You want me to?
Yes, because since Habitat for Humanity is left, we have a gap that we're definitely trying to fill. Essentially, since they provided such a service to the city with low to moderate income families with housing assistance. And if that is sort of just a Scrivener's error, that will be brought to Matt's attention. We can go ahead and correct it.
So I just wanted to see, because that was two statements that kind of conflicted with one another.
Yep, it does say additionally, the city refers to Habitat for Humanity for taking care of immediate needs.
I think at the time that Habitat was operating, they were referred to them, but since this program year is in the past, and they're no longer, so we can adjust that to say that
Just
they're
refer,
no
so
longer.
it's reflecting on previous. So I just want to make sure that's accurate. And then my only other comment was on page 9. This has been a big topic for council, and perhaps it's just because it's in the past and if it changes in the future. It says homelessness is not identified as a high priority issue or need in Sierra Vista.
As far as the 2018
Funding.
funding for that year.
For that year. Okay.
Yeah, this was the program year 2018 report.
Okay.
So future CDBG programs will reflect council's priorities as established this year.
Okay. I think that's all that I have.
Okay, good catches. Okay. Anything else on item number 3? Thanks, Blake. We go on to new business, item number 4, pre-annexation agreement with the Cochise Road to LLC, Big O Tires, and who's going to do that one?
I'll do that, Mr. Mayor.
Jeff?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So this is a request for a development/annexation agreement with Big O Tires. Again, a reminder, this is not part of the annexation process. This is simply just the development agreement, which provides the parameters for the annexation process. Okay. So a little bit of background. It looks like my let's see, may have disappeared on me here. Okay, that's all right. Well, we all know where it's at, right? Big O Tires.
On the corner by the mall.
Yes.
Right here. Ah,
I just so I can track.
thank you. Okay, so a little bit of background about the annexation development agreement. The location is northwest corner of South Highway 92 and Avenue de Cochise. The current zoning on the property in Cochise County is actually a general business. When it is annexed, it'll come over as a general commercial zoning district, which is the equivalent zoning district. It is approximately 1 acre and is entirely surrounded by the city jurisdictional boundaries. Now, the agreement that you have in your packets today kind of outlines the terms and conditions for the annexation. One of the key conditions is that the owner consents to the annexation provided that the city construct at its sole cost and expense a commercial driveway apron providing ingress and egress from Avenue de Cochise to the property with the following conditions. One, that the apron be restricted to right-in, right-out turning movements, which makes sense because there's already a median at Avenue de Cochise, so it would be limited right-in, right-out. The apron will be entirely located within 50 feet of the west property line, unless an alternative location is mutually agreed to by the parties. The apron will be substantially conformed to standard detail number 262, unless modified with the consent of the parties to this agreement. And the detail 262 is the standard detail for commercial driveways. Number D, the city shall commence construction of the commercial driveway apron within 180 days from the date of execution by both parties, unless an extension of the time is granted by the owner. The city will not be responsible for any future repairs or maintenance of the driveway apron following the construction. And the city shall not annex the property until the commercial driveway apron passes its final inspection by the city engineer. Now, in terms of the financial impact of this project, the city fiscal year 2019-2020 budget allocates $20,000 from the HERF funds to construct the commercial driveway apron. Now, staff estimates Big O Tires would contribute $26,000 to $36,000 annually in local sales tax. So the first year net benefit to the city exceeds the estimated driveway apron construction costs. And that is concludes staff's report, Mr. Mayor.
Question?
Is this an unusual kind of
Well, this-
request from?
Well, this is unique because I will tell you, we primarily attract commercial properties because of the sales tax primarily, okay? And this is one, I've talked to the owners like 7 years ago, I think, about this, and they were interested there in annexing there. This seems to give them an improvement to their property, gives us a chance at the sales tax, so it seems like a pretty good deal. My concern is, as this is written, there's nothing in there that says the landowner will apply for annexation once the improvement has been made. There's nothing requiring him to do that, because he can get the improvement and say, well, I'm not gonna proceed to the annexation. And then we're there, we just spent 20 grand and we got nothing. So if I missed something, tell me about it.
Let me see here. Well, I think you're right, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of looking at the language now. It does say the city shall not annex the property until the commercial driveway apron passes the final inspection.
Okay.
But of course, it doesn't require the developer to.
But the thing is, the property owner needs to say, once the, what was the last thing you said, once the improvements meet the city standards, at that, he should have 120 days to file his annexation petition,
Okay.
or whatever is the reasonable amount of time.
And Mr. Mayor, in the agreement, the first item is annexation consent, and the owner consents to annex into the property.
When? It needs to be within so many days after the construction is complete on the, he needs to file his annexation.
Okay.
Okay, we need to check on that before we get back.
We'll talk to
to
him.
us.
Okay.
Did Jeff say that he's completely surrounded by the city?
That's fine.
Yeah, he is now, he wasn't 7 years ago.
So every other business is already.
And then that little sector, yeah.
He's the only one.
He's the only one on the corner, he's the last dog in the hunt. Okay,
Okay.
anything else on this item? All right, let's see. Vigo Tires, that was item 4. Item 5 is Chief Thrasher.
Yes, sir.
Talk to us about the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and how they're going to pay us for our overtime.
All right, sure. So last year, if you recall, we approved an intergovernmental agreement between us and DEA to join the HIDTA task force, high intensity drug trafficking area task force, to create a force multiplier in the city for both us and DEA in regards to drug enforcement. As part of that agreement, DEA has agreed to reimburse under that agreement up to $16,000 a year for overtime that this officer that's assigned to the task force would work as part of that. That money is funneled through the city of Tucson as a fiscal agent for the grant. So money was reallocated this year in the amount of $3,500 to reimburse for overtime for the officer that works as part of the HIDTA task force. He doesn't work over there part-time, he does not work over there full-time, part-time with the city, part-time with the task force. So this money would reimburse for his overtime that he works as part of the task force. On a yearly basis, the officers that are assigned to work in narcotics work well over that amount of overtime as part of these groups and task force. So I do not see that it would actually increase any liability on the PSPRS. It would actually reimburse us for money that's already going to be spent.
So what you're telling us then is, unlike some other situations where we end up paying the PSPRS overtime, this would be included.
Absolutely. Well, yes. So this is money that we would be spending in overtime anyway.
Okay.
And now we would be getting reimbursed for it as part of being part of this task force.
So it's not additional.
It's not additional. I checked with him so far just this year. He has already worked well over that amount in overtime as part of this drug, not just necessarily this drug task force, but working narcotics in the Sierra Vista area. You'll also see the next item is also the renewal of that agreement with HIDTA. Basically that has to be redone every year. The grants are on a 2-year cycle. That's why you see that the effective dates of it.
The other question I have for you is pretty much I'd say workforce. We discussed about plussing you up a couple of officers so that you can overcome shortfall of actual people in the field policing. I know this is drugs are a critical thing, but does this detract from your ability to have a half an officer or a full officer on patrol?
No, it does not, because this officer is already assigned to our community response team and already has been. So now he just ends up spending half his time with the task force, which part of the agreement that we have with DEA is that they will focus entirely for his work in the Sierra Vista area. So it just actually enhances our ability to deal with this particular issue using an officer that's already assigned into that unit.
Okay, so I think that answers my manpower question.
So,
Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have any examples of the successes or stories of this?
So just 2 weeks ago, as part of one of the investigations, we needed to do 5 simultaneous search warrants, which is a huge burden on us. And the task force, which also includes Homeland Security, Border Patrol, we were able to use assets from all 3 of those agencies plus ours to simultaneously work those search warrants, which wouldn't necessarily be possible without being part of that task force.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief? Okay, chief, you got the next one too?
And the next one is just the renewal of the agreement to allow our officer to work part-time over there with the DEA as part of this task force. And as stated before, to create that force multiplier for us as we deal with the narcotics, both in the Sierra Vista but also the greater Sierra Vista area.
Okay. Any questions on item 6? Okay, thank you, chief. We'll next go on to item number 7, which is the refuse service fees. And Sharon.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm going to go over here because I hate talking with my back to people. All right, so Mayor, members of council, this ties back to a discussion we had a couple months ago during a work session on the sustainability of the Refuse Enterprise Fund. At that time, we were looking specifically at recycling, but I also got into a few of the other things we had found in the Refuse Enterprise Fund while we were looking at recycling that we're going to need to have another look in the future. So I am back with those now. And at the time when I presented this before, council's consensus was to come back with the full cost recovery, the maximum option. So that's what I'm going to be presenting to you here today. As all of you know, the Refuse Fund is an enterprise fund, meaning that the user fees go directly back in to support the operations. And the other part of that is it runs like a business. Business needs to run in the black or it doesn't stay a business for very long. So if individual aspects of that business are running in the red, then those are things that need another look, like what we're doing on these items. It is important to understand as we go into this that we are not pursuing a rate increase at this time. And that's one of the things I'm hearing out in the community. The city is doing a rate increase. A rate increase would be a increase to the fee that every residential or commercial owner in the system pays. What we're looking at here is actually a fee increase. So only the people that use these particular services would see any kind of an increase. The people that do not use these services, their monthly bill would stay exactly the same. In many regards, a fee increase is considered to be more fair because it only impacts those people who use the service. The downside is it's spread over a smaller number of people, so it can sometimes be a higher amount. So our current proposal targets a few specific services that are underperforming financially, and I'll go into some of the reasons why, and thus they're creating a drain on the fund as a whole. The first is residential dumpsters. The intention of this program when we started it was to provide a means for people who had higher than usual trash needs for a limited amount of time to be able to get a dumpster to help them with those needs. Common things that come up are home renovation projects or that sort of thing. But short-term solution. But what's happened is because our dumpster fees are so low, is what we're seeing out in the community is dumpsters are staying on pieces of residential property for an extended period of time because it's so cheap to keep them and to have them emptied that people are keeping the dumpster in their front yard for months, sometimes years. So one of the changes we made is to reduce the number of options available. In terms of how we ended up at 5, I'm really not sure the answer to that question. That's been that way for a number of years. But our thinking now is, what's really the difference between a 2.5 and a 3 cubic yard dumpster? Do we need to provide both? It simplifies our billing and also our inventory management if we focus on a few sizes. So we picked 3 and 6. Those are some of the more common ones, and one smaller option, one slightly larger option.
Sharon, what's the change there? The previous cost.
The previous cost in this area was 0, but that's a little bit. I'll get into the fees here.
Okay.
We're changing the structure of it and how we bill it, so it's not a direct comparison.
And since we're talking about the dumpsters, what are we doing with the ones we're not going to use, those sizes? The 2.5, the 4, the 8? Any that we have that are still usable, we could use for different projects that the city has going on. Realistically, some are probably nearing the end of their useful life, and thus the dumpster would be going in the dumpster anyhow. I don't know.
Or the surplus.
Yeah.
They can be surplus.
They can be surplus as well. Okay. Yeah. So currently, our residential dumpster program is operating at a loss that we estimate around $60,000 a year. So in looking at the services, we've proposed some increases and also changing the way that we bill. The reality of the fees is that despite the fact the county tipping fees, as you all know, have been going up for many years, the disposal fee component of the residential dumpster program has not been increased in many years. So we've been losing on that. Also, we've been receiving no cost recovery at all towards the cost of delivering and hauling the dumpster. So when we drop it off, when we take it out to the transfer station to empty it, basically the only things we were getting cost recovery on before were the rental fee and the disposal fee. And as I mentioned, disposal fee was low because it wasn't based on the current tipping rates. So what we are doing now is establishing a pull fee. And for many people, this will be an all-inclusive fee. So they only pay once if they have the dumpster for less than 30 days. So let's say that you order a 3 cubic yard dumpster, you have a kitchen remodel project going on, and you're not anticipating to need it for any more than 30 days. You would be assessed a fee of $153.24. Is it going to ask me for a password? Yeah. You would be assessed a fee of $153.24, which would include the delivery, the rental, the pickup, and one disposal of that dumpster. If you are done with it, at that point in time, that's all you're ever assessed, $153.24. Let's say your project goes long, or you have, let's say first of all you have more garbage than what you're anticipating, and you need the dumpster dumped a second time. Then you would be assessed another fee of $153.24 to run the same process over again. Let's say you decide to keep the dumpster for a longer period of time. If you have no other activity for 30 days, so you do not call for a pickup in that time, on day 31, then you would be assessed a rental fee, which is basically the depreciation cost of the dumpster. So while that asset is in your possession and we're not getting any other revenue from it, it's depreciating. And that's what that fee is for. As soon as you call for a pickup of that dumpster, then the clock starts over on the 30-day rental fee. So you only pay that if there's no activity for 30 days.
And you're lowering it because...
We're lowering it because we calculated out the actual depreciation expense for the dumpster. It's based on the actual cost. We did the math on it. So that item actually drops. Overall, you can see the cost goes up. But again, it's reflecting the actual cost of doing business and providing this service. All right, moving on from residential dumpsters.
Can you talk about comparables to commercial people that come in and give you the folding bag to get picked up, or another commercial? Because we don't require our residents to do this service; they can also do that and go to another. So how does this compare with the other commercial services?
Based on my research, this is comparable to what other commercial services are offering. One of the challenges is they don't necessarily publish rates because they don't have to. So can you get a deal for them? Yes, potentially you can. By increasing our fees, may our business in this area drop? Yes, it may. We're actually okay with that because we're currently losing money on it. So if we still have some aspect of this operation and we're making money at it, that's good for us.
Well, and that's the other thing I look at this is a government service. We don't necessarily want to be in competition with the commercial folks.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're at or near the same prices, maybe a little lower than the same prices, we're not competing to put them out of business if they can make a living doing this kind of stuff. Okay.
All right. The second area we're taking a closer look at is compost. So when we started the compost program, the intention was to divert material from the landfill, divert green waste from the landfill. And the good news is we've succeeded. The bad news is we've been victims of our own success, and we have a proliferation of green waste, more than we could probably chip in several months time currently stacked on the site. It's just a lot of material coming in, and the capacity of our equipment, the capacity of our staff is just not there to be able to process all of this green waste. In addition, we have some pieces of equipment, very expensive, 2 of them in particular. One of them is the chipper, and the other one is the windrow turner. Combined, those 2 pieces of equipment are about $2 million to replace. Both of them are about 10 years old, getting more than a little long in the tooth, and in need of a new solution, whether that be purchasing new pieces of equipment or contracting or something. And as of right now, we don't have the excess revenue coming in from compost to cover those capital costs. So we have to do something for the sustainability of the operation. In regards to our, well, first of all, let me say, so currently our inbound fee is 0. We don't charge people, city residents, anything to drop off their green waste. That's part of our issue. Second part of our issue is the outbound fee for screen compost. Don't know how else to say it. Our compost is so cheap that other people will buy it and then resell it at a higher price. That's how far below market we are on our compost. You could go to a hardware store and get one bag for a couple dollars, or we'll sell you an entire truckload for a couple dollars. So we're definitely below market there. We cannot keep compost in stock when we have it because it just flies out the door.
It's so cheap.
Yeah, because it's so cheap. So people buy it as quickly as we have it available. So it just tells me that the supply and demand curves at compost are out of whack, which is why we have proposed increases there. So based on the new fee structure, everyone who brings green waste to the compost facility would be charged $10. And then for the outbound fee, screen compost would increase from 15 to 25.
Sharon, did you give any consideration to equally raise, when I brought it up when we were upstairs and you first suggested it, increasing them equally so we're not putting $10 on the residents and only it just...
Yeah, we did consider that. The reason we didn't do it that way was just from an operational perspective. It's easier if everyone is charged the same amount. And then when we look at the way our other operations run, the recycling center, it's free for both city and county residents. We don't charge a differential structure. People go to the Cove, we don't have...
That's not true. For recycling now in the county, they're going to charge.
Yeah.
They're going to start charging people.
But the county...
You turn left and turn it in free at Sierra Vista, or you turn right and go give it to the county and pay some money.
I think
Yeah.
it's the same, the county people can come to us and drop it off for free.
Correct, but if they go to the right, the mayor is absolutely correct. They'll be paying if they go to the right. But, you know, the Cove, city and county residents, same fee. Leisure classes, city and county residents, the same fee.
But we also have residents paying a bill already for refuse.
Right, and they do, but one of the things that we're looking at with these fees is to make these fees standalone sufficient, not subsidized by the rest of the fund. The goal is that each portion of the fund would support itself without being subsidized by another operation. Because if someone's underpaying, that just means that someone else is overpaying.
Yeah, I understand that. And the only comment we got on that was just that one email that whole time.
I received 3, and I'll go through the 3 I got at the end, but I did get 3 comments within the 60-day period.
Thank you.
All right, before we go from compost, I got
Yep.
a related question. It's not just for dealing with the fees. So in the compost, we have the green component. We also have the how do I say this?
Biosolids.
The biosolids from the sewer.
Yes.
Biosolids. Okay.
Mhm.
I wasn't going to say another word, but biosolids.
Thank
Okay. So those are dry. The question is, we have biosolids and we have more green waste than the biosolids So to meet the grade A compost that's turned out by the Glenroe machine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, we have more, the mixture ends up being about 50-50, biosolids to green waste, and we have more green waste in that equation than what we
Okay,
need.
and the other, I guess the other thing is there something else we can do with that green waste that's productive other than just letting it sit and rot in the sun?
Well, we're
Well, that's something
exploring.
to look at. I was gonna say, that's
Yeah.
something to look at, okay?
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor the discussion here.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
also? You had mentioned last time we had this presentation that there was commercial entities bringing in
Mhm.
big truckloads of green waste, and
Mhm.
have you considered a differentiate, so they would pay $10 for a huge like trailer and truck, and then a resident who just maybe filled up the back of the truck also pays $10?
Fortunately, no. That ends up being the discretion of our workers out there. So if you come in with a pickup truck bed loaded and a trailer loaded, they're going to charge you double the fee. If you come in with a huge dump truck, they're going to do their best guess on about how many pickup truck loads that is and assess the fee. It generally goes in favor of the customer. So it's not going to, be, well, that's 4.2, loads. They're going to round it down.
But what happens currently is that landscaping company comes in and they
5 times a
take
day.
somebody's
Really?
residential bill and say, I'm a city resident, and so they pay nothing.
Yeah.
And they dump 8, 9, 10 times a day.
Yeah. Yes,
So
that
now
happens.
they'll pay per load.
They will at least pay something.
Yeah.
And what does it mean that the outbound fee for mulch will be zero?
Okay, currently, mulch isn't a product that there is very much demand for. That's something that if anyone wants some, what mulch is it's the overs. It's the stuff that doesn't pass through the screen to make it for compost. That material, we used to charge for it, but basically because there's not enough demand out there, if someone wants the mulch, we're willing to give them that for free. Okay, then the last service is the special pickups. This has two separate components. I'll call it the bulky waste and the green waste. Currently, this portion of the fund operates significantly below cost recovery to the tune of about $81,000 a year. So it's a pretty big loss on this component. What special pickups are, they take place on Wednesday. Work for special pickups typically starts in the admin building on Monday when they print out special pickup tickets. Those tickets, which are usually 100 to 150 a week, depending on the week. Some weeks can be over 200, get given to the refuse section, and 2 employees go out in a pickup truck and take care of the special pickups. The vast majority of those are green waste pickups, somewhere around 75 to 100 a week, and then the rest are the bulky pickups, 10 to 15 a week. And so 2 employees go around in a pickup truck and pick up these items as they find them. Currently, the fee for green waste pickup is $0, and the fee for the bulky waste is $14.40. On green waste, it kind of stands to reason that if we implement a fee out at compost to drop off your own, then the fee for the city to pick it up has to be more than that. Otherwise, why would anyone take it themselves out to the compost facility? For the bulky pickups, currently, like I said, $14.40. So pretty much what we did on this one is we just calculated the cost of the 2 employees' time, the vehicle, the gas, everything that goes into that operation, down to the sticker that we give to people when they purchase a bulky waste pickup. And to get cost recovery out of this operation, we're looking at about $45 per pickup.
Is it going to be an issue because people are whatever, maybe they just don't wanna pay $45, they're gonna start putting it in their green bins for trash day. Well, that, I don't,
That's one issue, and the other issue is what we had before within the city that's going to continue to have to be monitored is people
illegal dump.
will dump in a wash somewhere on state trust land, or either in the city or in the county, and we have to go clean it up.
Yeah. And that is a concern. You know, there is always a tipping point, you know, trying to figure out what price is reasonable that the city can get cost recovery to keep the fund in the black, which is our goal, but doesn't incentivize the kind of behavior you don't want that then drives up costs. It's a balancing act, and it's difficult to say exactly where that line is going to fall.
I'm sorry. You said it's operating right now at 81,000. So how much is this gonna? Well, you don't know how many people would order it though.
Yeah. This would put the fund into the black.
If the behavior
Right.
stays the same,
But
that's all
they
we can
won't.
predict. And that's
Yeah.
all we can predict.
Okay.
Really.
You can predict they won't.
Well, I mean, it's what percentage?
Right.
That's the trick.
Well, won't
Why won't they?
Is it-
Because they were
it's
doing it
cheaper
for
to do less?
free,
Yeah.
and now we're going to say we'll do it for $45. I just can't imagine they'll be like, yeah, that's
Sign
fine.
me
Yeah, They'll be like, I'll just get my green bin.
But some people can't pay for a truck, or some people, they still gotta have it picked up.
But
It ain't
yard
gonna fit in
waste
that little
isn't a big
trash
deal
can.
to be put into the green can, right?
Yeah,
Seems like
and you
You
know,
know, just end up in the trash can.
Mayor Pro Tem Gray brings up a good point. If they put their yard waste into the green can, we can accommodate it there as long as it's not sticking out and, you know, thrown in bundles next to the can. It can be accommodated there. It will break down as green waste in the landfill. Is it better to make compost out of it? Absolutely. But
Too much.
yeah, but right now we are overloaded with green waste, and we have capital equipment coming up for replacement that currently we don't have the funds to replace. So we need to do something with that operation to make it sustainable moving into the future.
And Sharon made a point during the dumpster discussion that applies here as well. If our number of pickups do drop off, then we are not losing money any longer from making the pickup at such a low cost.
It's win-win.
You know, and when we were looking at this too, the discussion of people making the wrong choice did come up, and we went back and forth, but ultimately things tipped to, we believe that most residents are going to make the right choice. We don't believe that most of our residents are going to make the wrong choice,
Start dumping.
that they'll start illegal dumping. So as I mentioned, the items have been out for comments for 60 days. We received 3 comments. One of them stated that she understood the reasons for the fee increase and preferred that over a rate increase. The second comment was that rates, not fees, but rates should be reduced because city stopped curbside recycling. And the last comment, which came in today,
Actually, we reduced, when we went to just curbside recycling, we reduced it $1.
yeah,
Yes, we
So
did.
she said we need to put it back and add $1 to it? I don't know. That doesn't
further
make
reduce
sense.
it, further reduce it. And then the last comment, which just came in today, expressed concern that green waste fees would lead to more green waste being diverted to the landfill. Obviously, you know, it's a tough discussion. We do not take any sort of fee increase or rate increase lightly. We understand the impact this has on our citizens, but when we're looking at the sustainability of the fund, we thought that this was the best way to get us there, that would only impact the people who actually use those services, and leave rates for the rest at a stable level.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, when council was discussing the rate increase that was put into place last year, that rate increase only made up half of the difference that the fund was running in the red. And council tasked staff to look at other ways beyond continuing to raise the rates that the fund could be made healthier and whole again. And so Sharon and her staff did an excellent job digging into each of the components of the services offered that fall under the refuse fund and found these particular areas that were running far in the red that presented an opportunity to make up that difference. And that's what they've done, and that's what this would do, and hopefully prevent the raising of rates for the entire community for some time to come.
Any questions?
Were you able to look at costs in other communities comparable to our size to kind of see where we sit around the state?
Councilwoman Calhoun, we didn't spend a great deal of time on that effort just because there are so many variables. Looking at, Phoenix community, their landfill fees are much, much cheaper than ours are, so the disposal element is going to be completely different than what we have here. You start getting into a whole bunch of variables. We focus on what would achieve cost recovery for us with our specific situations here.
It's hard to compare apples to oranges, is what you're saying. Anybody else, ladies? Yeah, I'll just make a philosophical comment here, is one of the good things about this and the sewer fund is we operate them like a business.
Yeah.
But we have to make business-like decisions, and we're doing it as a public body rather than a business owner. So that brings up additional challenges for us. I'm glad to hear the discussion talked about what the folks wanted, what the folks didn't want. Are we being fair to everybody? All those things have to be taken into consideration where they may not happen in a commercial business, but in an enterprise fund, we need to do that. So I think Sharon's done a pretty good job with her crew coming up with a good proposal. So with that, I'll just say thanks, Sharon. We appreciate all the hard work. And hopefully the other enterprise fund, the sewer fund, is doing okay, but that's on the agenda. So we'll let you go unless there's something else on the side. Thank you, Sharon. So let's see who's next. Was that it?
Yeah, that was it.
For the meeting?
It was.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. Okay. Then we'll do the call to the public, comments and council, etc. So that ends the item A for today's agenda. We're going to go on to item B, and it's the Technical Assistance Program final report, which should be in your packets. And Tony, are you going to introduce us?
Yes, sir, I will. I'll handle the introductions. So, Mayor and Council, just to kind of wrap this up. So, 2+ years ago, the city applied for the Office of Economic Adjustment grant. So this is kind of the final formal step of that grant. So I have the process we will go through, again, from the Technical Assistance Program and then the airport study, all one, will be finalized really formally today. What that allows us to do, the staff, is then the remaining steps are to take the products that we will receive from the consultants. We'll do the performance evaluation. We'll also do the financial evaluation. And then that will close out our relationship formally within that grant. So I just kind of wanted to give you a framework of where we're at. So I've got the honor and the privilege, we've had the good fun probably the last 18 months to work with David Welsh from Sun Corridor and Steve Egan, who's been the program manager expertise for this. So they've got a short slide presentation. You've seen the executive report. And then if you want to dig through the entire report to the tune of 113 pages, it was all included in there. So with that, David?
Tony said it was by weight.
Clicker's hey. I don't know. What do we do with the clicker?
Oh, we can do it here, huh?
I don't know where the clicker's at.
That's the recorder.
It's in the chair over there.
Who's sitting on it?
Here, I got it. Yeah. Okay, so as Tony said, good afternoon. I'm Steve Egan and David Welsh here. We briefed you a couple of times on the program, and we're kind of giving you this time the final closeout report. And certainly we've learned a few things. We've met some wonderful people that we have in the community here at Sierra Vista, and it's really great to see the entrepreneurship and the excitement that these small business entities have in your community. What we were tasked to do was to take the identified companies and help them go beyond their reliance on the Department of Defense, a la Fort Huachuca, and see how they can expand themselves into other places, either other government agencies in the commercial world, or how they could do that. What we found ourselves doing, of course, is we needed to do just an inventory of programs of what actually exists out there that helps these kinds of firms be successful in what they do. We also had to go about the task of recruiting firms. Now, you would think that would be fairly simple to do. We should be able to get a number of firms that would be interested in getting basically free assistance with the expertise of Sun Corridor through all the different business disciplines. But as we found out, that was a little bit harder to do than we thought, fundamentally because of the criteria that the grant specified. It had some very specific requirements that started to exclude a lot of different companies that were interested in participating, but they just didn't fit the criteria. And then, of course, once we identified the firms, we'll talk about them specifically, but we wanted to match really the kind of expertise we had within Sun Corridor and the membership of Sun Corridor to help those folks with what their basic and their extended strategic needs are and their business needs were. So, in doing that recruitment, this was probably one of the most significant challenges that we had, is doing the recruitment. We did a large amount of mailings. We participated in a number of events that were here in Sierra Vista. We did the Good Morning Sierra Vista a couple of times. We did an outreach with the chambers. We did radio events. So we really tried to reach the folks that could be impacted by this and benefit from the program. As it turned out, we eventually did find ourselves with 6 firms that did actually qualify, and they ultimately did enroll in the program. Also, what was interesting to say is they didn't fit just one particular business model. They ranged from transportation companies, engineering software systems and services, as well as other business services and contracting efforts. So it was a good, diverse set of companies that I think we were able to work with. And interestingly enough, and this just as an aside, 5 of the 6 were women-owned and operated businesses. So it was good to see that there's some really great, strong companies out there that really want to build themselves, and it has a great, diverse background of who makes them up. So really, when we talk about what is it that we're really trying to do here, and that really is finding really what the firms really needed from a technical business and leadership standpoint. And there isn't any one particular area that I would say to emphasize anymore, but perhaps the leadership one. What we found is we had a number of companies that they had strong leaders, but as a small business, they were so preoccupied with the day-to-day. They were so preoccupied in making sure they're making their payroll or making their business stay afloat that they were able to think clearly and logically about the elements of their business and what the needs were of their business, and taking that business and continuing it on to the next level. And in particular, thinking about opening their apertures on how do we go beyond what their current thinking was in that area of revenue growth, employee growth, business growth. So what I think resulted with over the period of time that we've been working with these six different firms really have produced what I would consider to be significant revenue growth. We'll go into the details of that in just a moment. Certainly employment expansion that has resulted, and we'll talk about that in terms of the number of folks they've actually been able to bring into their businesses, as well as the development of the leadership of those companies. We got more feedback from the owners of the company that they appreciated the fact of having a group of executives that they could use as sounding boards, they could get challenged from, have discussions with, things that perhaps weren't necessarily part of their particular business, but once they thought about it, they could see the application of those lessons learned that people's experiences had, that they wouldn't go through and fall into the same kind of traps that can result if you do not have the background and thinking around where you're taking your business. That blind spot that you can't always see, the idea is to be able to know and think about that so you don't have that blind spot, particularly in a small company, put a real throw you in a ditch. So we're going to go through the impacts. David, I think you can take it from here and give the session here an idea of what we actually resulted in.
So in working with the firms and as Sun Corridor, we do this process through a number of projects. So we'll have firms that we're working with that are either relocating in or they're expanding. And so we treated these firms as expansion firms. And up to this point when we were working with Tony, we had a model that we've been working with, and we have a contract economist that helps us do this. So we feed data into that model. Number of employees being added, revenues that are generated, the wages that those employees are being paid, and the sector within which, because each one of those has a different impact on the community. Some positions with higher wages, higher skills have higher multiplier effects, and they have a bigger effect on the community than ones that have a lower skill level or lower wage level pay. So what we were able to do with work with Tony's, we didn't have the ability to run this model in Sierra Vista before this grant. And with this, we were able to work with the economist and with the grant that we were, and build the tables out that let us do this kind of impact analysis on these types of projects. So really the first time we did it with the Sierra Vista specific data on these firms. Now, granted, we were not able to get the level of detail out of these firms that you might always would like out of a project. They're in this voluntarily. You don't want to go at them with a 3-page application that says, tell us, and they're reluctant to do it. These are closely held firms. People protect this information. So we went in generally with a fairly simple survey that said number of employees added, what were the wages, what were the sector, and what was your revenue growth around that. It was pretty much that simple. We could dive into this further as we were talking to before the session. But with that, we were able to get if you will, a thumbnail of what the snapshot looked like over from the period that they started the grant to the time they got out of the period of that grant activity ceased, okay? And that's what this reflects. So we asked them, how many contracts have you been awarded since you started the program? They came back with 14, which we thought was healthy across the 6 firms. Employment growth, and we did, at Tony's request, did break it down so that we did ask them how many of the employees that you added were within the community and which kind were out. Because we had a couple of these folks that are doing contracts for the federal government. They apply for a contract, it's putting security guards at Lake Havasu or something, let's say. Where was it?
I think it was Lake Mead.
Lake Mead or something. Anyway, not here. You're not going to see those wages. The profits of those wages and those contracts will flow back through the community because the firm is based here. So you'll get some residual out of that, but you don't get the heavy impact of those employees because they're not living here. So we did break it out to the 30 total job growth, and then we asked them on average what was your revenue growth from the time you started the program until after. So I'll go to the next one if you get the clicker. So I want to step back for just a minute and maybe walk through how we treat this model, how we look at economic. It really drives how we look at economic development in Sun Corridor, because there are many definitions out there, and we stick to this one, and that is we deal only with firms that we call primary employers. So that means it can be large or small. It can be as large as Raytheon, or it can be 2 people in a garage. But what you have to do is export something out of the community, whether that's a product or a service, and cause capital to come in that wasn't here before. Otherwise, it's called retail. And retail happens after you do economic development. It's not economic development. Now, in Arizona communities, because of the reliance on sales tax and the reliance, it gets blurry for communities when they think, well, economic development for me, if I'm sitting in the mayor's spot, is I get that Big O Tire in here, I'm getting those taxes. But that Big O Tire is here because there's somebody working at Fort Huachuca. And Fort Huachuca is exporting that product or service, if you will, out to the military in this case. So it's important to know that. So the model that we stick with when we do this is that we look at the primary direct jobs that are happening, and then feed that in, and that produces a total impact that includes indirect jobs. And the indirect jobs are the folks that happen, they're not the direct employees of the firm. But as that firm adds somebody, you had 30 employees added at Sierra Vista, that group then goes to the dry cleaner, and that person goes to gets gas. So you get employment that happens because they have a job. And then you get the induced impacts of that, which are really the third tier of that, and that's the taxes that the government collects along the way, and whether that's local, state, or federal. So the model that we feed in, when I'm going to show you the next page that gets to the impact, you're going to see some figures that are that exponentially grow. And so it's important to keep them in context and understand how the model treats it. And oftentimes what you want to do is stop your consideration of those maybe at the direct impacts or the indirect impacts, and then whether you take the induced or not, is up to you. So if you go to the next one, Steve.
Any questions about this at this point? Okay. And certainly ask questions as we go to the next slide here, because this is where the real impact is now demonstrated.
Right. So we had a reduce, and you've got a full-blown version of the whole of the M-Plan, as we call it, reported this in your final report. It goes into great detail about some of the assumptions that are in there, and one of the council members actually pointed some of this out. And we could go into that, but I thought let's focus in on there's two whole sections in here that are omitted because there's a way to handle how much they spend on construction, and there's a way to handle how much they spend on equipment. Well, we didn't track any of that with these firms. You could get into more detail if you want to dive into their business and see if they'll share that with you. Well, we took those out because they were all zeros and it was kind of pointless. But when you add 30 jobs or retain 30 jobs within a community, as the grantees indicated that they did through our survey, and you have the wages at $52,000 average, you feed that into new and retained payroll, you end up with that 1.5 million amount.
And new and retained, how many are new and how many are retained?
Well, we estimate of the 30, there was about half of those retained and half of them new, based on
they didn't lose their jobs during this period?
It depends on what perspective you get. They're new employees for that firm. But that firm may just be taking over employees that were held from another contract.
They may have competed with someone else here at Sierra Vista.
What we try to focus on in these scenarios is net new employment to the community. And it's all about what perspective you take, right? So for the firm, this is a big deal. They added 5 folks. But those folks had another hat on the day before. This firm competed for that contract out at the Fort or another agency. They switch hats.
Got it. Okay.
Big deal for the firm. Another firm lost.
Right.
So if you take it from their perspective, that's not economic development.
What about half of these jobs we estimated to be new?
Brand new.
Net new?
Net new.
Yes.
Net new.
Do we have this data for each firm?
Yes. Yes, we have a survey that they filled out. We did not include it in there because we did not have the permission from each firm. And we could go back to them and ask. But we kept that confidential and told them, part of the reason that we got them to fill it out was that we said we were going to aggregate it.
Keep it anonymous.
Because they're always concerned about, they don't want you to know what, there was a competitive advantage about what they put in for wages, what they did for contracts, and so in my experience, you decrease your ability to collect information once you do.
Well, I understand that, but also
I know. Trust me, it's always this balancing act, and it gets more complicated as the firms get larger and more sophisticated. But anyway, so when you feed that into the model, and you get the direct impacts of the employment, you get the indirect and the induced, you come up with a figure over the next 5 years, and this is a projected 5-year impact of $30 million into the community. And you can break that down into, given the wages and the sectors that we had of the 30 jobs, there's a multiplier effect applied to those within the model that gave us the 51. Now, sometimes when you have all aerospace engineering positions, let's say, you can have upwards of a 3, 4, 5 multiplier effect on some jobs. These weren't those kinds of jobs. So whatever the ratio is from 30 to 51, that's the type of, I think it was 1.7 when I did the math the other night. You can go upwards of 3, 4, 5 times that when you get it into a community that then can sustain, those weren't those. We had one firm in particular that dragged the average wage up significantly, up into the 52. Otherwise, it hovered, before we had that one firm report, it was below that. But new payroll supported, 12 million, when you feed it through the 51 jobs, and then the household spending. You'll notice the difference between the new payroll supported and the household spending. Well, guess what? Not everybody spends everything out in the community that they take in. And that's a good thing, right? Because that does indicate some kind of a savings rate or something. Sometimes it does, where they're doing more than the payroll contains, and that can be an indication of the jobs are at a level that are being subsidized by the community. You can have wages that are below your average or your median, and that means the community is supporting those folks. That's why in economic development you always aim for not subsidizing ones that end up costing you on the back end. Because it can look like you're growing. Arizona did that for decades. We led the country in job growth, but because the wages that we were applying to those positions, we were actually growing ourselves into poverty, which doesn't make sense when you think about the job growth, but you've got to keep the wages up so that you don't slip into that. And then the important part for you all sitting around this table is what does that end up trickling out to be? And I think that when you look at what Tony was able to land with the grant award of on our end of it, let's say just at 200,000, the 5-year projection on that 200,000 investment, which really came from the feds, will result from these jobs. The local taxes you can see there tend to pay off. In a small level, tended to pay off for you just in the from your perspective, let alone the macro community. Any questions on that? That thing is detailed in there, and you can see. And again, I was explaining to the councilwoman before the meeting that, like with any model, it's information in, information out. So the more detailed and the more relevant that the information is that the firm will feed us and allow us to feed into, the better the model information comes out the other end. But it doesn't matter if we're working on this project or any other, it's always this balancing act that they consider that proprietary, it's competitive for them, and they don't want the world knowing what they paid their people. That's one of their biggest costs.
I think what is interesting here is, really looking at the number of jobs, that certainly is verifiable. Knowing what that payroll is associated with those jobs, that's verifiable. Doing nothing else, looking at what the grant itself was attempting to do in funding an activity to take businesses and help grow them and grow them in the community, I think that certainly provides a view of success. Be a pessimist and say, I only believe 50% of it. Because sometimes people will disagree with the economics and how it's calculated. You still have a pretty significant payback associated with that grant investment. And in particular, I think from Sierra Vista's standpoint, the grant was just that, it was a grant. It was paid for by the Department of Defense. So fundamentally, Sierra Vista was seeing that as being at a zero investment, seeing the community benefit by having job growth, having revenue growth, and having companies actually get better skills at managing their businesses, developing their businesses, and being able to get, because we spend a lot of time on business strategy with these firms. And I think that's one of the things that they certainly appreciated. And talking about innovative ways for them to bring employment in. We had one company, by the way, that they needed a marketing director, desperately. They had no way knowing how to pay for it. We gave them an idea on how to pay for that person, clearly not thinking about putting them on their payroll. And that worked beautifully for them. So, just bringing some of those ideas to these businesses from a different perspective, I think really helps them overall. Any questions? comments?
I just have a question on the new tax revenue for local taxes. That's city and county combined, right? That's not just Sierra Vista.
Correct,
Okay,
correct. So on the property, obviously,
right,
that's disproportionately
Yeah.
Cochise County
right,
and not you. On sales, that's disproportionately you and
right,
not the county, right?
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
just
And
wanted
state
to
share,
make
yeah.
sure that
So-
was clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't end up with the 350. Is that what?
Well, that would be our total tax.
Right.
Yes.
Property revenue for property tax, so that would be
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
For those things first, that would be-
Yeah, that would be amazing. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone. Thank you.
Sure. So we did put together a list of lessons learned and observations, and it was clearly a conversation we had was these companies really do need, and by the way, this is nothing new. Access to capital is probably the number one issue any small business firm faces in their day-to-day operations. But what we tried to do is give them some ideas on some of these opportunities where they could get that funding, that they just didn't have knowledge about, or had even ever heard about some of these places where they can get access to capital. And I think that had helped them in how they were thinking through their next steps on their capital investments and their business expansions. The firms really did lack some operational mentoring. I mean, they were giving it the best they had. They were scraping and working very, very hard. But must not have any movement in the room. We just turned the lights off.
Work going on.
Oh, okay. But what we found is that they really had an insatiable desire to talk about their businesses and to talk with people about their businesses that to help them move their businesses in the right direction.
Some of this was really simple stuff. I mean, not to undersell, kind of what we were doing with it, but these firms are so overly reliant on these drivers that own the firm. When they're this closely held, they're doing everything, right? They're wearing all the hats. They couldn't see how to pull themselves out for one afternoon to do strategic planning on what the next pipeline might be for them. So just to give them some ideas on how to reshuffle their staff so that a Thursday afternoon could be regularly set aside where they weren't worrying about the cash register, they weren't worried about, was monumental for them. I mean, I know 3 of them instituted sometime during the week that they had to have their proprietor be able to set that aside and do some of the things they did when they started the firm. And they all said, when I first started this firm up, I did a lot of this planning. I did a lot of this figuring out how I was in. Then I got into the run of the firm, and now I can't seem to get off the treadmill. I can never get off to figure out how I'm going to look at the next thing. And it was like, you're going to have somebody help you on the treadmill so that Thursday afternoons can be left for that. And then once you have that, then you can take advantage of some of this assistance. Because when you're running on the treadmill, I don't care if it's free or not, it's very hard to take advantage of it. Some assistance, they can't even get an appointment.
The third item is really improved access to some of the educational organizations. I mean, Cochise County, the community college here is outstanding. The leader there was very active in some of the things that we were doing, very active in helping us recruit companies. But one of the things that we noticed is that U of A has a presence, ASU less or so, but there just needs to be a way that these companies can have access to that educational institution. One of the things that we saw is that some simple things that they needed, whether it be an IT support or things like that, that would be a great project for a graduate student or an undergraduate student to do, which would be not very costly from the college standpoint, and they'd like to have that hands-on learning. They just didn't have that access or knew how to get access to the universities for that. That kind of plays into the coordination and collaboration aspect area as well. And then the last one, really, market analysis is really necessary to truly understand the market here in Sierra Vista. I think that when looking at this grant from the very beginning standpoint, I'm not sure it was very clear, and I'm not speaking because I have intimate knowledge with this, really clear about what the market really had to offer in applying for the grant and participating in the grant. Because like we said, when we went forward and made the offering out to try to recruit the companies, we did kind of a simple analysis, and Mike and Tony helped us with this, to get a look at who were the firms that were doing business with the Department of Defense. It turned out there were 99 firms. The problem is, they were either not around, or they did not qualify with the criteria that we were talking about that was set out by the grant. So it's important that we think we have enough of the understanding of the market and how it plays, how it can play out when thinking about applying if there's a subsequent grant opportunity or something like that in your future. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that was one of my questions.
Yes.
Was, did we understand what the criteria are or were when we even applied for that? And are you saying
yeah.
we didn't?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it was probably, somebody else has an answer.
Well, no, the challenge is the people that wrote it are no longer here. So, and I can't find any evidence of, so I'm not saying they didn't do it, I can't find any evidence of it.
For market analysis.
To really understand when we say we needed businesses
Okay.
with a percentage from DoD as a revenue stream, because that's part of the OEA side. When we pulled 99 firms, I pulled them. That was anyone in the city or the greater city limits that did a federal contract in the last 5 years. So that 99 isn't really 99. Because by the time, and I think of 3 or 4 firms that did one-off 4 years ago.
Painters or
So as you go from 99 to, call it 50 or 60, then what's your participation rate? And that's when you end up with 6. And really that was my point of, when we go back to the OEA, and I talked to them, they said it's not unusual. Because when you go to write it, you have big thoughts and big ideas about where it's going to go.
Okay, I wasn't trying to point fingers, but I was curious about.
Right. Well, and that's why I wanted to, and that's why I asked them to include that in the lessons learned, because to me that's part of the process of how do we set the grant up, how do we orchestrate it, and then how do we run it. And we actually took the limits down. I mean, if you had any reasonable Department of Defense revenue, you were welcome to play. You know, we started at upwards of 30 to 40%. I worked through the OEA and we brought that down. So again, I think it was all well intentioned, and as we said with the group, maybe it wasn't the way we wanted it, but we made the absolute best. And I physically looked at the firms, and actually I got head nods in confirmation. So
It's always a tension. I've been doing this 30 years, and there's always a
Giving away your
tension
age now.
in applying for federal funds with communities that are and so would you do it again? Would you take another 200,000 from them that had those criteria tests? Absolutely you would, right? Because then you do with it what makes sense to you, and as long as you can get them to feel like, because they understand too. Like as Tony says, there's no surprise here.
Yeah,
So
but you know, and I appreciate what you're saying, but it's $200,000. No matter where it came from, I mean, it's my taxes.
Sure.
So it just would seem to me that, again, not pointing fingers and not blaming, it's just part of this whole lesson learned thing,
right.
that to spend $200,000 on 4 or 6 companies,
Six.
for all the effort that you put into it, and I haven't read the complete thing, and I know there are hours in here that we probably aren't really aware of at this point, or I'm not aware of at this point. It seems like a lot.
Well, yeah, right. You do the math, and you're like, some part of you want to go.
Yeah.
How about if I give you each $50,000, each of those firms? What would you do with that? What good would you? That's a whole person. That's a whole. But it doesn't work that way, right? It never works that way with what the grantors are doing. You'd like to go to them as a community and say, give me the 200,000. Let me apply the 200,000 in the most effective. And so they let. And this is just David talking. They let Tony, take the criteria and bend them a little bit, and then he takes it over here, and you end up the best you can. But they're not going to turn over 200,000 to you and say, it works in the same thing with any grants. You look at law enforcement and they say, yeah, great. I don't want to spend it on this. I'd rather. Well, they're not going to let you do that. So.
Well, and the second part, I would argue. I mean, one, if we just retain the 30 jobs, that puts you at the $1.5 million. So over the next 5 years. So is that valuable? The second part is we still don't know what the businesses are going to do with the knowledge. And there's 2 or 3 that have some tremendous potential. I mean, I would say all 5 or 6, but the reality is 3 or 4 have some really unique ideas. So the question is, if you plant a seed this year, and we're where we are now, what they do with it next year or the following year that's the interesting part.
Will there be that kind of follow-up?
As much as our office can do, and that's the challenge with this grant, and that's kind of in here. You've got the money to have outside resources and support. Kind of what we've agreed to is, one, we're still a member of Sun Corridor, so we still have the relationship does not end officially. And if the companies need additional items or information, then Mike and I are going to do our best to get them connected where they need to be connected.
And that door stays open. You know, we're still consider ourselves a representative of the 4-county region, which is Cochise, Santa Cruz, Pinal, and Pima.
And by the way, I mean, we built relationships with these 6 companies. We have told them they can call us anytime, bounce ideas off, get some feedback. We said we're just committed to do that. From the standpoint of what we invested in, our time as well.
That federal procurement program that we helped sponsor and that exposed all those folks coming into town for that event, that relationship continues too. And I do think that there is a potential there with that group to continue to foster further opportunities with them, and how that connection can happen. And we've encouraged Tony and Mike to continue to press them, that group, to come back and make
That was
them.
part of your funding to do
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And that actually impacted beyond the 6. That was all the attendees.
Yeah, that was a very good event.
So you were there?
I say, I
That's right.
did attend it, yeah.
Out of the 6, you said you couldn't work with one of them. Who was the one you couldn't work with?
I'm not going to blow the names
I don't
per
think we
se.
should say the name.
Protect
short
the
an-
innocent.
The short answer is we put certain requirements for them to participate, and they did not
We
meet.
didn't meet it.
And we carried them for a period of time, and quite frankly, they didn't meet our expectations. So we ended up with 5, added 1, lost 1, ended up with 5 total. In the end.
Was that the one out of Phoenix or? That's what I'm
Originally,
asking.
correct, yes.
Okay.
There were promises about what they would.
There were some representations that were made during the
That
process
didn't
where
get followed through.
that were not accurate. Let's say that. We gave them the benefit of the doubt.
Any other questions,
We were
discussion?
duly punished for our good deed.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you, and we appreciate what you've done here.
Appreciate your partnership.
We're very happy with the continuing ongoing relationship with Sun Corridor, and hopefully we can continue to build on the relationship.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to do a little shout out for Tony and Mike, because they really did a yeoman's job in helping us they participated, they were engaged, they were always willing to help make this thing a success, and I think that's really the reason why we're able to get kind of where we got to. So thanks guys for what you did, and thank you very much for doing that.
And I'd have to second that too, because when we applied for this grant, I was extremely skeptical, especially when we had trouble getting the number of firms we needed, et cetera. And I know Tony probably had some restless nights and some hard work and some arm twisting going on to get this pulled off. But I think we have an acceptable solution to result. And of course, we all would have wanted it to be better. But as a first time doing one of these grants, I think we've learned a lot on how to work that, and it should we do it a similar grant in the future, I think we'll be better prepared to execute that.
That's 100% right.
Okay. So, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
All right, we now move on to the next item, which is report on recent trips, meetings, and future meetings. I've asked just on future meetings, I've asked to move back the work session on boards and commissions back a month, so I can actually get caught up on that issue, because since I'm the one that's presenting that, and that's basically all I got on that one. Anybody else on that one?
Were we going to do this might have been Juan's idea, I don't remember who said it first, suggested those of us who went to the conference having an agenda on one of the work sessions to,
Well, if you want to have a work session item to discuss what we learned and share information from what we learned at the conference, we can certainly do that. The thing is, I'm concerned about the structure because basically, in my time, I spent a lot of time working with up there, actually doing administrative stuff with the league staff rather than going to a lot of the sessions like I would have preferred to do. If you want to do that, we can certainly schedule one of those. But again, the way that's going to have to happen is we go to say, okay, Gwen, what is your report? What is your report? What is your report? What is your report? And basically have a work session where we just basically discuss it. And we can certainly do that. I think we need to schedule a time with Victoria to do that if that's the desire of the council. I understand we've got 2 people that want to do that. Do we have others? Let's see, now, Will, you weren't there, you were.
if
You
no
were
one
in and
else
out?
is interested,
Oh,
I
I was there
could,
the whole time.
The other way to do that, of course, is
I
to,
could pick some of the.
well,
We're just curious.
the other way to do that, if we only have 1 or 2 that are interested in that meeting, is to actually do a trip report where we actually say, here's the sessions I went to and here's the key points from the sessions, and then share that through the council read file. So that's the alternate way to do it.
Of course, those of us who went to stuff are really excited about what we saw, but if nobody else really wants to hear all of that, we can just do a simple trip report. We
And
can
that's,
do that.
and to me, that may be the best way to do it, because you actually make a record too, so that you can go back and refer
Well,
to
we
it.
could do both.
I'm,
You know how
you
much
know,
I like, how much I like sitting in meetings.
We want to hear all the stuff you did administratively. We want to hear all that gossip from the mayors and, what were you going to say, Sarah?
I think personally a trip report is more appropriate and would rather see the application of the knowledge learned than just speaking about it.
So we make recommendations in our trip reports. Maybe it'll be closer
Absolutely.
to necessary that
And
we
then
talk
maybe-
about the
and then maybe-
recommendations.
Yeah, that's right, and then you talk about the recommendations, that would be better, so.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is we do, for those who just so desire that went there, can make, do the trip report. If you have a recommendation trip report, we need to come back at some future time and say, okay, here were the recommendations. And talk, have a work session just on the
I think
recommendations.
that's good. That's better
Okay.
than rehashing, like,
Yeah,
I have like 20 pages of notes. You guys
Yeah.
want to just read through all of my notes? I mean,
yeah.
probably not.
Summarize them and tell us, but if we're not going to talk about it, then we can write about it.
I think, what did you glean? What are your key takeaways of what you want to implement and turn into action?
We get those on the work
That's more
session.
important.
Yeah, and that would be, I think that's a more effective way to do it, okay? So anything else on future meetings, trip reports? Board and commission liaison updates, item D. Any
Oh.
board and commission updates?
Yes, Monday at 5 p.m. During the regular Arts and Humanities Commission meeting, a few of the West End commissioners are going to join us, as well as 5 of the 13 artists that submitted
Oh, cool.
designs.
That's Monday.
Yeah, at Oscar Urn Community Center, and yeah, so procurement got 5 of them to confirm, but they're gonna consider all of the designs submitted. Just those 5 are gonna have an opportunity to speak directly about their work.
Was there a page that had any of those pictures or any of their, was there something online?
No, I have it in my email.
It wasn't,
Yeah, I haven't seen
I believe, yet unto the arts and humanities.
I think when they make their recommendation to council,
The submissions will be public.
all of them, you'll have to talk to me and then all the others too.
Okay. Anything else on boards and commissions?
Do you want to say anything about Carmichael?
There's a cleanup when, Blake, you know when the cleanup is? Carmichael Labor, I guess the 28th, I'm not sure. It's coming up.
One that was rescheduled for the 21st, was that
I
the
know,
Carmichael?
which one was it? We have 2 cleanups coming up on the
Okay.
west end.
I can get you that information, I think it's in my office, so I'll just run back there.
Okay, you share that with us so everybody knows when that is. I'm gonna move on to item E, future discussion items, and I'm gonna say, I don't think we need to discuss was an issue that Gwen brought up, and it dealt with prayer and people understand that when we do the invocation, there is a list of local, I'll say pastors, although some of them may not be ordained or whatever, that we use to invite people to do that. So unlike a certain city that had devil worshippers or Satan worshippers come in to give the prayer, we look for mainstream religious people, put them on the list, and we invite them to come to speak. So there's already procedure for that. So hopefully we won't have a
Is it written?
it's I don't think it's a written procedure. It hasn't been approved by the council. It's just a matter of practice, the way we do it. And
How
that's,
do you become approved to be on that?
well, you get called and invited based on the fact that you're local and you're a member of a mainstream church in town.
I think that needs some work.
Yeah.
I disagree. I think we're doing it just fine.
So good.
Yeah. Well, whoever slipped up.
It was Scottsdale.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, that's a rare oddity that I don't expect to happen, even though one time in the past, before we set this up, we did have somebody come in who was, I don't know if they were their own minister or what the case was, but it was a rather odd invocation. And when we looked at the background of this person who had volunteered to come in, they probably were not suitable for that mission.
So again, who makes a decision about what's suitable?
I set the agenda for the council, and I ultimately would tell Maria that somebody is not suitable and doesn't meet the criteria, which is local, ordained, mainstream. Okay, that's basically the three criteria that we follow, and we issue the invitation. It's not open for anybody to volunteer.
Okay.
Okay. So that kind of answers that question. Any other future discussion items or requests from council? Am I forgetting something? I feel like I am.
Council handbook and the commission handbook.
We're
Push
gonna-
that a month back
Yes,
as well.
let's do that as well, until we figure out the commission standing, Okay, so if there's nothing else before the council, we'll see you Thursday. Hopefully we'll see you at the 9/11 ceremony at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Oktoberfest this weekend. Starts at 5 on Friday, and I guess we're not going to be selling beer and weenies on Sunday night, but the carnival will still be there. That's my understanding.
Friday and Sunday, Saturday, carnival, and Sunday.
Okay. So.
But you are selling beer and
Beer and
Bratwurst.
Bratwurst and whatever else. I don't think we have a Hauptpunchen, a half chicken,
Aw.
but you can wait 2 weeks and get that from the Knights of Columbus. Okay. Anything else? Seeing nothing else before the council? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
The Oktoberfest.
Oh, I never go to that.
You don't love it.
That's
It's
like a literally
It's
nightmare.
like
That is like the most.
One time in meetings.
She gave that letter to William.
Hi. Some of it.
How are you?
Peruse it tonight. I can see how I just check my mail.
Sarah. You too. I know you see my dogs all the time. Yeah. They're my
Yeah.
I saw that. I saw your experience. That was really cute. That was really cute. And a cute dog. But yeah, those, I can have to work all the